Alright, today what I want to present to you all is something that I had to do for my EDOL 647 master's class. This was a research project that we had to do, and based on the needs of our students, I saw fit to do the impact of ability grouping on academic and social development. So what I did, I wanted to explore ability grouping, not only on the academic effect it has on the kids, but also their social impact. So, since I teach 4th grade, and 4th grade is really the first year that these kids have been exposed to ability grouping, what I wanted to do was see, does it really make a huge difference or does it not? And in which kids do I see the biggest difference, and what we can do as a school to improve what we are doing for all the students. Well, okay, so what's the purpose? The purpose of this was, like I said, just to see what we needed to change, what we were doing well, what the kids were really grasping from ability grouping, what they were not, how they felt about it, most importantly. So teachers across the country and in our own district right here have turned to ability grouping to address various learning needs. And it really is great in some aspects, and in some ways I found that it was not. It makes sense to do this. You know, we think that we will see progression from this. And a lot of schools, in most every other grade, they all have ability grouping. But how does it affect our intermediate kids here at North Jackson? It makes sense that it will close the achievement gap, we think. We also think that it will meet individual student needs. And in some cases, yes it did. In some, not really so much. Okay? But in the big scheme of things, does it work? So it says that research on the utilization of ability grouping has led to mixed findings, and that's exactly what I'm going to explain to you all today. That's what I found out. Academic impacts are nominal. Self-esteem can actually be impacted negatively, which is a huge problem. So what should we do? Yes, I'm telling you all of this, but what is it that we're supposed to do about it? And my two main research questions, because when you think of ability grouping, it's kind of an overwhelming topic, but the two research questions that I focused on is, what effect does the implementation of ability grouping have on student academic growth in only a 4th grade mathematics classroom? Because I teach math the majority of the day, that is what I wanted to focus on. But also, what effect does ability grouping have on students' self-esteem in a 4th grade mathematics classroom? That was huge to me, because I wanted to know, you know, are they performing academically? Are they making improvements? Yes, no. But how do they feel about it? Because if kids aren't happy, we know they're not going to learn. We know they're not going to try their best. We know they're going to have a hard time grasping concepts. So these were two very interesting avenues that I went down to explore. So here we go. What's the point? The point, should ability grouping be considered best practice, which in some cases people would say absolutely yes it is. If so, what is the extent to which it should be utilized in our classrooms? How often should we do it? Should we only do it for certain subjects? Are there certain kids that are going to respond to it more than others? What is it that we need to do to improve to make it best practice? Or should we do away with it altogether? Perform better academically, which is exactly what I was talking about earlier. The better they feel about themselves, the better they're going to perform. And if they're not happy, they're not going to learn, they're not going to perform, they're not going to do what they're supposed to be doing. So, with that being said, none of the data actually supported the notion that ability grouping positively impacts students. It does impact them, but negative or positive, it didn't really differentiate. In fact, the study showed the gap actually grew in the area of mathematics, because when you are ability grouping in math, and I've seen this, your weakest student is only going to be as strong as the strongest, weakest student, if that makes sense. And in the higher math classes, they're obviously going to perform about the same pace. So nobody's really getting a chance to grow off of anybody else. In fact, the study showed the gap, like I said, just in mathematics. Okay? And I'm not sure about any other subject, but comparing that just for you all, because I know you teach math, that's what I wanted to focus on. Mark found that ability grouping was beneficial for students nearing benchmarks, but did not benefit the lowest achieving students. It broadened that gap. Again, because they were only learning off of what they saw. They weren't picking up on a stronger student's response or anything like that. So just in math, it didn't really seem to benefit them that much. And also in another study, the findings suggested that ability groups were most effective when used sparingly, which you know here at North Jackson we use them all the time for almost every subject. So maybe they found that it was just going to be more effective in one certain area. When utilized frequently, they found that the achievement gap widened. Again, that's not good, considering we do that all day, every day. As students age, they found that they can actually feel ostracized and socially stigmatized, yikes, when labeled as gifted or high achieving in comparison to their peers. So even if you've got those high groups, they can still feel a bad sense of self-worth because they are labeled as gifted or they're really progressing great, which makes them feel under pressure. They don't like that because they always feel like they have to live up to those expectations and they can't make a mistake or can't do anything wrong. There were a few other researchers that supported this hypothesis in finding that higher academic achievement leads to a higher risk of social isolation, especially as these kids get older. You don't want them to feel that way constantly just because they are gifted or because they are higher achieving in one certain area. And to kind of close up on what the literature review, what it found, the inherent problem with ability groups lies in the risk of widening the already existing achievement gap and harming student self-perception. Despite the fact that some research suggests high ability students do benefit from ability grouping, most students are not high achieving. Okay, that's not the majority of what we teach every day. It is the responsibility of teachers to meet the needs and think in the best interest of every single student, not just those that you think will really do well in an ability grouping situation. Not just those that are already gifted academically. You've got to think of those kids that are never going to be exposed to those higher order thinking questions or seeing those students' responses if they're only in a class that does as well as they do. You want to have that differentiated learning there. Okay. Data collected for pre and post-study comparison. Here is what I did when I went to find out, okay, this is what the literature tells me, and this is what I need to do with it. So I did collect different types of data from a high ability group that I had in math and a very low achieving group that I had in math. And the data that I collected, first of all, obviously, I wanted to explore the academic effects. So I collected some academic progress, which was our math data from the end of last spring as third graders to the fall of this year when they came into fourth grade. And the reason I did that was because in third grade, they are not ability grouped per subject. And in the fall, when they came to me as fourth graders, they had already had time to be exposed in an ability grouping situation. So I wanted to compare the two to see if there were any major trends or anything that I noticed. And for student self-perception, I conducted with them a self-esteem inventory. I also did a Likert scale to see, hey, how do you feel about this class? You know, what is it that you like? What is it that you dislike? And then, obviously, just student observation. And that probably told me more than anything. The participants, it was 40 fourth grade mathematics students. In the high ability group, I had 22 students. In the low achieving, there were 18. It's okay. And then student participation was contingent upon parental consent, of course. I made sure, that this was okay with parents just to say, hey, I'm conducting this study, and kind of laid it out just so that I could get their consent. But what I found, obviously, not to give it away, but the high achieving students, as well as with the low achieving students, I didn't notice a huge difference. but the materials, again, that I used were the MAP test and scores from that. That tells you a lot. And a self-esteem inventory. So I will explain the results as follows. Okay, the results and the findings. 13 of the 18 students in the low achieving ability group either showed a normal amount of growth or their test scores stayed relatively the same. There was nothing that said, hey, ability grouping is making this big, huge impact on these kids. 3 students in this group showed an increase higher than the expected norm. So there were a few that really did well, but can that be attributed to ability grouping? Maybe, maybe not. Okay, and 2 students actually regressed. So when looking at that data, there is nothing to support that ability grouping makes a really big impact on these kids, especially in this low ability group, like I said. Okay, and in the high achieving group, 11 of the 22 students showed a higher than expected level of improvement. 6 students showed a normal, regular grade level improvement. And guys, normal, I base that on our math norms for that time of year. 5 students' scores remained about the same, and all 22 students in the high group were above the normal grade level after the post-test. Is that because they're ability group? Maybe. Is it also because they're good at math? Maybe. There was nothing to support that said just ability grouping makes them perform at a higher level. And to kind of explain this, this was my low group of students. There were 18 students. What I did, the color coding, if it makes any sense to you all, for every student that actually went up from the pre-test to the post, and I'm calling the pre-test the spring score, and the post-test was the fall score. So if it is in blue, so student 3, 5, 9, 15, and 16 actually made a little bit of improvement, so their score went up. For those students that scored in red, yes, some of them went up, but not up enough to meet the norm for that type of year, or for that specific month of the year. And then the green students actually regressed. They went down. So if you just want to look at that for just a second, I thought that was kind of interesting to see. Yes, it might be making a little bit of a difference, but is it enough to change our entire schedule around to where that kids are going from 4th grade up to 6th grade for math, or from 6th grade down to 5th grade for math, because we know that can become a nightmare to schedule. Okay, and here is the high group. The high group contained 22 children. Again, if they were blue, they made enough gains to say that it made a positive impact. The kids in red went up slightly, but not enough to make a huge difference. And the ones that were in green, also, you can see some went up. Actually, some of them went down. So it's nothing that would cause me to want to say, hey, ability grouping is making a really big impact. It was just kind of, I mean, there it is. Not a lot to support that it really grew or really failed. So, my results. Both groups showed some progression, just like I said, but no more than would be expected without any intervention. Hey, if they're going to grow in math, they're probably going to grow in math whether they've been in an ability group math class or whether they've been in a regular math class, probably just because of more experience. They're becoming more mature. It could be attributed to that. From a statistical standpoint, the findings are not overly compelling. Again, it doesn't make you go, oh my goodness, look at all of the improvements, or look at all of the kids that went down. It doesn't do either. It's just, it's basic data, and there it is. There's not a lot you can do with that. Okay. Also, the high achieving students reported higher levels of self-esteem and had a more positive Likert scale responses than students in the low group. And again, that is because they already feel good about math. They're already comfortable with it. Observations showed high achieving students were less likely to engage in disruptive or disengaged behaviors. You know that without them having to take the Likert scale. That's just how it is. Neither group showed significant change throughout the study. So there's nothing super exciting to report, but there's nothing super negative either. It is what it is. Okay. Now in terms of how we ended up and where should we go from here, the follow-up recommendations would be this. Ability grouping has neither a positive or a negative impact on student growth. Would you all, I think that everybody in here would agree. Moderate use can be a positive addition to differentiated instruction. So yes, it does have its place and its time, but maybe it's not in every single subject. It doesn't lend itself to everything. And above all, it is not a fix-all solution. We can't just say, okay, well these kids are performing this way, so let's put them all in one group, or let's put all of these kids in one group. And it should be a part of the teacher's tool bag. So guys, if you have a class that is, some kids are really low achieving, some kids are really high achieving, you know as a teacher, guys, how to meet the needs of all those students. We shouldn't maybe always just go to putting them in one group. Though I do agree with you, it is easier to teach. At some points it's easier to make lessons. It's not always what's best for the students. In conclusion, ability grouping can help students grow, but must be used in moderation. That's the most important thing that I found here. And again, the reports were not enough to make me sway one way or another. Yes, I still like it, in some aspects. In some aspects, I came to see, it's not really making that big of a difference. Other differentiated instruction models must be used in conjunction with ability grouping. So even though you have maybe a high group of math students or a medium group of math students, you still should be doing other things within that group to differentiate your instruction, because just because you're a high achieving math student doesn't mean that all of the 20-some odd kids you have in there are all on that same high level. So you need to make sure you're differentiating between your highest, and your lowest, highest. And just as much for those very low achieving students, even more important with them probably. And in short, more research is needed when comparing the two groups, of course, for ability grouping and heterogeneous grouping. Guys, just because I've done this research and because I did these studies doesn't mean that's how it is with all kids. Okay. And my references are as follows. And there we go. All right, guys, and thank you all so much.